Hello everyone and welcome back to Fresh Meat, IGN's dedicated show to all things horror. Tristan Ogilvie here. Joining me of course is the heart and soul and face and brains of Fresh Meat, Lucy O'Brien.
I don't know how to react to these compliments every time.
I'm so sorry.
That one, Tristan.
Just take it.
Hello.
It's been a while between episodes for a handful of reasons. One of them being, of course, the fact that we were over at E3 just last month, where amongst all kinds of crazy cool technologies and games, we got a bit more hands-on or face-on time with virtual reality in the form of Oculus Rift, Project Morpheus, and what have you. And that feeds into the basis for this episode of Fresh Meat, which is looking at the future of gaming and whether or not VR is the future of horror in the video game space. Lucy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously we don't quite know, generally speaking, we don't quite know how VR is going to roll out at this point. I think at E3 it still felt like it was on the edge of a precipice rather than actually being a fully blown hardware phenomenon.
Yep.
It's sort of like everything was still kind of tucked away and there were only a handful of demos and yeah, I mean...
A lot of the headsets still had duct tape and stuff.
They did, yeah. Oculus scrolled in
in Sharpie.
Vivid, yeah. But listen, I mean, I think one thing that made me really excited is basically looking at VR and horror. Because I do want to go into my experience with one particular demo. I will do that a little bit later. But I'd just like to sort of talk about, I guess, the most obvious things that VR can bring to the horror landscape, you know, pending it actually becoming a successful sort of new delivery system. I guess, first of all, peripheral vision. I mean, I think that is such a big aspect of VR that you can't discount when it comes to horror. Seeing things out of the corner of your eye is a big part of the horror experience. And with something strapped to your face, where things are like dancing around the corner, and doing this is my VR move. That is a really powerful thing to experience in horror. I mean, I guess with the more sort of fixed, video game horror experiences that we have now, they're very scripted, right? So like you'll see something and you'll turn around slowly with the controller, but actually having things, sort of the sensation of them coming up beside you and behind you is incredibly powerful. I mean,
it sure beats like just sitting really close to the TV, which is what I do now. But I also think the peripheral stuff's good because it's easier to sort of trick you with just shadows and things like that. But I also think that even the directed stuff is possibly even more powerful in VR. I'm thinking of, for example, like the original BioShock. I think they did it in Infinite as well, where they sort of misdirect you by making you like fumble with a switch or something, and then you turn around and you're like nose to nose with a splicer. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that works really well with VR. Potentially heart attack inducing.
I think potentially heart attack material. And again, I want to go into that a bit later. I think also one thing that VR brings as well is this feeling of being trapped. So you've got something attached to your face, you've got a pair of headphones on, and that's a really claustrophobic feeling.
Absolutely.
It doesn't actually really matter what kind of VR experience you're having. It's actually quite a claustrophobic feeling. If you haven't tried a VR headset before, let me tell you, it's pretty close in there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's this kind of idea of being trapped within your own senses. And that's kind of horrible because for me, I'm a big horror fan, but I do find with the most intense horror experiences, I have a tendency to want to cover my ears. Like, you know how a lot of people like cover their eyes? For me, I'm all about stopping the sound because the sound is the most intense thing for me.
Well, you can close your eyes, right?
Well, you can close your eyes, but yeah.
You have to cover your ears,
Yeah, exactly. But when you've got a headset on and when you've got this big mask strapped to your face, you can't really do much without just stripping everything off. Which of course is kind of besides the point. But yeah, I just think this feeling of being trapped is also a really remarkable thing.
It's also like, because, maybe this is just because we experienced them so far mostly at trade shows and what have you, but it's also little bit sweaty, a little bit.
It's really sweaty. It's really sweaty. People don't talk about that in their like write-ups of these demos, but it's especially because with more intense experiences, you tend to sweat as well. Like you tend to kind of get all into what you're doing, and everything gets a bit misty. But that's very conducive to an extremely claustrophobic environment.
Yeah.
It's like breeding ground for horror.
And bacteria. I guess the main sort of stumbling block and the reservation that a lot of people have for VR so far has been the sort of control methods and how we'll sort of interact with these worlds. But Oculus revealed their sort of Oculus Touch, and Steam has
the Vive.
The Vive.
Yeah, using Valve's Steam VR
Do you think that's a
tracking
problem?
technology.
Do you think that's a problem that's sort of being solved?
I think it is a problem being solved. Right now, I guess with the Morpheus and with the Oculus, what we've seen have been primarily stationary experiences. Yes. So the most effective demos that we've experienced thus far have been ones where we've been seated. And I guess that brings me to the kitchen, which was a demo I played at Sony's E3 booth, which was a seated demo. And basically, you sit down, you've got the Morpheus strapped to your face. Like the Sony guy was all like, "Don't get too scared," and I was all like, "Oh, whatever," I was trying to be like all big about it. But it was terrifying because you're sitting down, and I could see my legs, and I could see my torso, and I could see my shoulders, like very manly shoulders, but they fit what I felt I was doing, right? So you've got like. I had a controller in my hand and my wrists were bound. And I was in a dirty, filthy kitchen. I looked to the side and there was like my coworker or a friend who also had his wrist tied, but he had a knife, right? So he comes up and was cutting the binds of my wrists like this. And then all of a sudden, this woman comes up from behind him, this like totally deranged, I mean, this is a Capcom demo, so you can kind of imagine what she looked like. Very sort of Ring-esque, very Japanese, like long hair, like black stuff coming out of her mouth, just stuff leaking.
Yep, just general
from
leaks.
The face.
Yep.
And she was laughing manically, and she plunges the knife into this guy, and he falls, and then she comes right up to you. And again, like I just can't stress how, because you're sitting down and because you can like fully see your body, how incredibly confronting it was to have her loom up like that over your face. And it was totally terrifying. And then some other stuff happened, but I hope that people will actually like be able to play that demo sometime in the future, and I don't want to ruin the whole thing. Yep. But that was for me the kind of selling point, I guess. That's why I wanted to come back and record this show, because like that for me was like, this is more than just kind of a gimmick. This is more than just something that can enhance an experience. I mean, this can be an entire experience in itself. Again, like it was a very short demo, and I wasn't doing any moving apart from like this with my hands, but it was so powerful. It was so powerful. I mean, I was trembling. And again, afterwards, like to the Sony guy, I was like, whatever, it's not big.
Was it, I mean, you say you were trembling, was it like approaching the borderline? Was it too much? What does it need? Will these experiences need a kind of theme park style? People with heart conditions shouldn't. I think definitely.
Like game makers will start, like they'll need, and certainly those who the classification boards and such. We're gonna actually have to start reassessing what kind of warnings we're gonna put in front of these experiences, because they are so intimate. And I think that everyone who played, remember, so obviously Alien Isolation had a demo on the Oculus Rift at last year's E3. Everyone who played that just said it was too much. I mean, Alien Isolation, as not in virtual reality, in reality is incredibly tense and terrifying and claustrophobic. Yep. So imagine it with an Oculus Rift strapped to your face. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So yeah, it was borderline, and I do wonder what kind of like potential medical disasters could come out as a result.
Yeah. Still, the first Oculus game to kill somebody. I mean, that's PR that money can't buy.
It's
really.
True. It's totally true.
I want to talk about on top of or on the back of VR, AR in the form of Microsoft's HoloLens.
Yeah. Which
Now,
was obviously another big theme of E3 this year.
Yes, even though it was kind of only there in the form of the Minecraft demo on stage and also the Halo experience, which is a very controlled kind of experience at the Microsoft booth. But it also has sort of horror, it has a very broad range of applications. Horror I think should certainly be one of them. Perhaps not in the initial HoloLens with the letterbox style of
A
view.
future model.
A future model,
Yeah.
but I think that certainly if PT is obviously one of the hugest horror experiences over the past, in recent time, and a PT version of your own house. Using HoloLens would be quite amazing. I mean, I have no idea how accurate the kind of spatial scanning and stuff that is in the HoloLens, but if you're walking around your own house, helps if you build a house with a looping hallway. It could be a little cost prohibitive for some people, but if it was able to recognize windows and doorways and stuff like that, and actually put visions of horror, in your house. I think that would be amazing. Or if you could walk up, you could follow like a trail of blood into the bathroom and look into the mirror and have things appear in the mirror that aren't actually behind you and all that kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. Actually, there was an Indiegogo project called Night Terrors.
Right.
That was basically offering that experience.
Right.
It didn't reach its funding goals, so I don't know if it's going to happen. But still, people are toying around with these ideas already.
Yeah, and I think that is certainly something that would make me drop dead in my own home.
Yeah.
Surrounded by my loved ones, which is how I want to go. But it wouldn't just have to be sort of supernatural. You could have kind of, I don't know, home invasion kind of games where you can sort of hear people, trying to break into the windows and that kind of stuff. Or even, augmenting the augmented reality with, your phone. You could have like Scream style,
It's terrifying.
like killers calling you and telling you to go to the front door and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it could be like a really, terrifying but amazing future gaming experience for horror fans. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whenever we're asking the question whether VR is the future of horror, I think obviously the design of the horror game itself still needs to stand up. The player's imagination is still the most important tool when it comes to any kind of horror experience. So, I do think that for the most part it's going to be incredible, but at the same time the design needs to stand up by itself. So yeah.
Yeah, we don't want Resident Evil 6 with
No.
better peripherals.
VR's not going to help that. I think that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Lucy.
Thank you, Tristan.
And thank you at home for watching. For all things horror, VR, Oculus, and other buzzwords from the future, stay right here, IGN. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, Luce, this VR episode of Fresh Meat is amazing. Luce? Oh my God!